Welcome back to another edition of Fantasy Football to the Max. I am your host, as always, Randy Isbell, and with me today, my co-host, Mike Mitchell. And Mike, I don't know what's going on with you, man. I don't know if you have a cold, but you sound different.
Well, I hope I sound different. I've addressed my sound issues a little bit, and hopefully this will give a little bit better listening quality for our wonderful fans out there.
Yes, Mike has purchased a mic, if you will. But we got to get right into it. We have so much to get to on this episode as we will tackle the running back position, the wide receiver position, and the tight ends as well. There's a lot to get to, so let's just get right to it with that number one pick, that pick that has been associated with the running back position for years, probably since I started playing fantasy football way back in the day. But now, you know, that the hype train for the wide receivers is there. So, Mike, the big question. You have the number one pick. Which position are you going with?
Well, tradition has told us you always take a running back with the number one pick. But this season, I am going wide receiver. And again, as we covered last week, you can't really go wrong with Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham. So it's one of those two guys for me.
Yeah, it's either those two or Julio Jones for me. It's just, I feel a little safer taking a wide receiver this year than a running back. I mean, go back to last year's drafts and how many people in the top 6 to 8 picks in most leagues were hurt that were running backs. And it's just something I would rather avoid. I'd rather stockpile in the running back position later on and take that quote-unquote safer pick early on. Yes, a wide receiver can get hurt too. You saw that on Thursday with Julio Jones having his injury scare. But I just feel a little safer with that. But speaking of safe, who's that guy that you're seeing in most mock drafts going in the first round that you want nothing to do with, Mike?
Well, for me, he's kind of an enigma just because I feel like he's going to have a good season, but I just don't feel confident in it. And that's Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, I understand how good the Cowboys' offensive line is, but and you have to understand too, DeMarco Murray was able, or not DeMarco Murray, but last season they were able to get production out of the running back position that you wouldn't have normally expected. And, you know, DeMarco Murray did run as a rookie there very successfully, which is all good and well, but he also had Tony Romo there for more than what we would have expected out of Tony Romo, who got hurt again tonight, for those of you who didn't know. So you're putting a lot of weight into a guy who's just a rookie, and I don't know if I can feel safe having Ezekiel Elliott as my number one pick.
Actually, you took the pick right away from me. Listen, I've said in the the football podcast that there are 3 strikes to Ezekiel Elliott to me. He's a rookie, and I tend to shy away from rookie running backs. He has that domestic violence issue kind of looming over his head, and he already has a hamstring issue going into the preseason. Now, he did look good in his first preseason game on Thursday, and we'll see where he goes from there. But it's just, I think he's going to be a great running back, and he might even have a good season. I don't want to take that risk with my very first pick with somebody like him. But just to throw another name out there, somebody that's still going in the first round, he's kind of been falling off in the stuff that I've kind of seen. But Le'Veon Bell, I'm kind of shying away from, once again suspended coming into the season. It is only 3 games instead of 4, but I don't think he ever got into that tip-top Le'Veon Bell form last year. And D'Angelo Williams is just fine. I think Pittsburgh is fine using him just as much as they are Bell.
Yeah, I would agree with Bell. Bell's kind of a late first round, somewhere in the second round kind of guy, so I didn't necessarily have him on this list per se, but for those people who are considering him in the first round, you're looking at a guy who obviously, as you stated, won't be there the first 3 weeks, which is a quarter of your season. And do you want to trust that he will stay out of trouble? I mean, the guy said he overslept for a drug test and missed a couple other ones. I mean, there's some definite character issues there, and guys with character issues, you never know when those could pop up. They could pop up at any point in the off season, obviously. And can we really be 100% sure that it wouldn't happen again sometime during the season? So there's a big risk there. Plus, his injury history isn't very good either.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about people that we would avoid in the first round. Is there anybody that comes to mind that you think is going in that middle second round, late second round, that you would take a reach on if you had one of those late first round picks because you think that they're getting undervalued?
Well, at wide receiver, I'm kind of high on A.J. Green. I think A.J. Green's got the potential to put up huge numbers this year. I mean, he's put up good numbers throughout his career, but now the question is, who else are they going to throw the ball to? You've got Tyler Eifert, who's had some injury issues. Their number 2 and 3 wide receivers are both gone, so he's the man in Cincinnati. And with that in mind, I think that has to increase his stock. Also, you could take a couple guys like a Lamar Miller and maybe a Mark Ingram and move them up too, just because they are going to be getting the majority of the carries in their backfields. And I think New Orleans has kind of let Mark Ingram, off the leash a little bit last year, and certainly allowed him to take a bigger role as the running game consists. And Lamar Miller is going to be leaned on heavily if Osweiler struggles out of the gate. So
I mean, when Osweiler struggles out of the gate,
he may.
He's terrible. Osweiler's awful. Listen, I love Lamar Miller. I have him very high up in my rankings. I have him 4th, actually, out of running backs. Not only do I think he's in a great fit there with a terrible quarterback, and they're going to lean on him to run that offense, but he's on a team that is actually going to run the ball. Go ask any Dolphins fan that paid attention last year. Lamar Miller was that guy that would go out and get you like 80 yards in the first half, and then the team would go, okay, you're done. You're going to get 3 more carries in the second half. Like, they would just shut him down. They wouldn't even go to him anymore after he would just dominate teams. So I think getting on a team that supports the run and is going to use him properly, I think he's going to shine heavily. Another running back that I really want to get to is Eddie Lacy. He had all those issues last year, gained a bunch of weight, was way out of shape, was a complete disappointment, especially for those fans that drafted him even number 1 overall last year. And I think that the hate has gotten way too far with him. He seems to be back to the way he was in 2014. He's showing great signs in the preseason that he's barreling through people like he was. So I think that image that we have of last season is still looming large. And if he's still available late in the first round, I would take him over Ezekiel Elliott.
It's a fair argument. I mean, you look at what Lacy did in 2014. He had 13 total touchdowns, and he had 1,500 yards from scrimmage. But there's obviously a pretty big risk there with Lacy after what we saw last season. I mean, what have you done for me lately, guys? Would say 758 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns last year for a guy who was a can't-miss first-round draft pick. That's kind of scary, and it kind of falls for me into the Ezekiel Elliott phase of what can we really expect out of him. So I'm not sure if I would be willing to gamble a first-round pick on him, but I certainly don't imagine he's going to slip beyond the second round.
Well, I mean, but who would you rather take? Would you rather take Eddie Lacy or would you rather take Ezekiel Elliott?
I would rather take Ezekiel Elliott just because I think he's going to have the chance to do more with that team. And, we could also go, how long is Tony Romo going to last?
He's 3 plays in the 3rd game of the preseason.
He might not even make it out of the preseason. Is that fair enough to say? I mean, there's a reasonable chance he doesn't even get past the preseason.
But you know what? There are Cowboys fans that are okay with that after seeing some of Dak Prescott.
I like Dak Prescott. I mean, he's fun to watch. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to translate to an NFL career. But if nothing else, I mean, he kind of reminds me of a young RG3. And, be interesting to see what he can do. I mean, if Romo can't even get out of his own way anymore, Dallas has to seriously consider what they're going to do, with their backup quarterback situation, because they're probably going to have to find out real quick as it pertains to Romo. But I think Elliott has a higher upside just because of the fact that his team tends to be a running team more than a passing team, and his quarterback situation is a bigger question mark as far as health is concerned, which means they're probably going to lean on him more than Eddie Lacy.
Yeah, but you lean on the rookie, he's going to get hurt, and that's what I worry about. So I'll just throw it out there. I'll take Eddie Lacy. You take Ezekiel Elliott. End of the year rankings.
Is that a You Betcha challenge?
That is a You Betcha challenge.
I accept, sir.
There you go. That's the first one of the podcast. And actually, I want to just jump right into the next one because you brought up AJ Green as another one of those candidates to go in the first round. I want to go in a different direction in the wide receiver position. That's Allen Robinson. For people that know me, know that I fell in love with the Jacksonville offense last year. I changed one of my fantasy team names to the Jacksonville Juggernauts because they basically led me to the playoffs after I decimated my draft. Allen Robinson is a beast, and in the preseason, he's showing no signs of slowing down. I mean, you look at last year, 1,400 yards receiving, 14 touchdowns, which was tied for first in the entire NFL. I see that continuing. Yes, I do think that the Jacksonville offense kind of balances itself out a little bit, but he is a top-notch talent. Somebody that I think next year we're talking about taking in that first 5 picks even. So I want to throw out another You Betcha challenge. You like AJ Green a lot being the only guy over there in Cincinnati. Now I want to take the main guy in a team that I think is winning the AFC South. So I'll take Allen Robinson if you want to take AJ Green.
That's a You Betcha challenge.
All right. So there you go. So we have 2 challenges right off. So let's go to a few team challenges that are going on right now, and it makes things very interesting when you are drafting. Obviously there are way too many questions in running backs, and it makes it even tougher when the teams don't even know who's going to be their main guy. So I just want to go through a few teams with you, Mike, as far as teams that have 2 running backs that will get drafted around the same time in most drafts, and just who would you rather want? And let's start in the AFC East, and let's start with the Miami Dolphins. Arian Foster, amazing talent, lots of injury risk. Would you rather want him, or you want Jay Ajayi?
I'm going to take Arian Foster in that mix, and yes, I know Arian Foster is probably only going to give you anywhere from 6 to 12 games. There's a reasonable chance of that, maybe less, maybe more, not likely more, but I will take Arian Foster for the majority of my time as a fantasy football owner versus Jay Ajayi. And part of the reason that I say that is obviously he has produced big numbers over his career when he's on the field. So you have to take the injury risk in mind there. But Miami, if they really were leaning towards Jay Ajayi, would they have made the moves they made in the offseason by picking up? They drafted a running back and they picked up another one, in the off season. So if they felt that strong about him, I'm not sure that he would be backing up Arian Foster even. So I like Arian Foster in that group.
Yeah, there's a lot of people saying Kenyon Drake could find himself in the mix a little bit if Arian Foster goes down. I'm with you. I'd rather take Arian Foster. By the time you're drafting him, probably 4th, 5th round, I'd say that's a time where that's an okay time to take risks, in my opinion. That's when I'm trying to build depth in my running backs or wide receivers. So take the injury risk for the higher talent, in my opinion, and take Arian Foster. How about, this one's interesting to me, the Cleveland Browns, Isaiah Crowell or Duke Johnson?
I think I like Duke Johnson. I know he had a concussion in the weekend's practice, but he's cleared for that, so it doesn't look like it's going to be a lingering issue. But with concussions, you do have to be careful because they can be recurring, obviously. But he has more ability to make big plays, in my opinion, than Crowell does. The only thing is, their styles are so different. Johnson's more of an out-of-the-backfield receiving back with some good moves as a running back, but he doesn't have the power that Crowell has. So you're more likely to see Crowell in red zone situations and see Duke Johnson more in passing situations. But I think for upside, I like Johnson better.
Yeah, I like Johnson too, and it might just be because of the offense I think Cleveland wants to run. With Robert Griffin III there, I think they're going to be a bit more open. Just looking for more speed. You can kind of see that with some of the wide receivers that they're focusing with here in the preseason. Yes, Crowell could be that goal line touchdown stealer that's just going to make your head hurt if you're a fantasy owner. But I like Duke Johnson as well. Big playability, great speed. As you said, he's great out of the backfield in the receiving game, which would help Griffin. So I'm with you there as well. I would go with Johnson. And let's go to Jacksonville, and this one's close to my heart because, again, I fell in love with the Jacksonville offense last year, and then they go out and get Chris Ivory, who used to play for my New York Jets, and it's him and TJ Yeldon. And I'll go first real quick, and I'm going Chris Ivory here. Listen, he is terrible as a receiving back, just terrible. So that's not what he's there for. He is the Crowell in this situation. But it's kind of the opposite to me. I think he will be one of the main focuses in the red zone. He will be a main focus anytime they have the lead because he's wonderful at ball control, and he would rather run into a defender than run around him, and he will bowl them over. I love Chris Ivory. I think he's going to have a great year down in Jacksonville, so I would rather have Ivory than Yeldon.
This one is really tough for me. I think you can make a fair argument for either guy, really. And, it kind of reminds me of, when D'Angelo Williams was with Carolina and you had Jonathan Stewart there and you weren't really sure which guy to take, which obviously the only guy to take in that situation was Cam Newton since he hogged all the touchdowns.
Yes.
But it was kind of the same type of situation where you've got a running back who's good between the 20s, but then you're going to have, Ivory coming in there and vulturing all the touchdowns. So it comes down to what's more valuable, a guy who's going to get you 5 touchdowns and anywhere from 900 to 1,200 scrimmage yards, or a guy that's going to get you, 10, 11 touchdowns and 600 yards. It really is kind of a wishy-washy thing for me, but I'm going to go on what Alan Hearns said, and I'm going to take Chris Ivory because nobody should know better than a guy who's playing alongside Chris Ivory than a receiver on his own team. So I'm going to agree with you on Chris Ivory, but it's very close.
All right, let's stay in the same division with those Tennessee Titans. Completely new backfield there as they go out and get DeMarco Murray and then draft Derrick Henry. This one's tough, Mike. Which way do you lean?
This one is also tough. I agree with you, but I'm going DeMarco Murray because, for one thing, he's going to start coming out of the gate from what it sounds like. So with him in a more of a balanced running situation, a team that wants to run the ball a little bit more than, say, Chip Kelly did, I think the scheme fits Murray's skill set better, and because that scheme is in place, I think Murray's value is going to go up as compared to last season, obviously, and we'll probably see something, not quite what we saw when he was with Dallas, but certainly an improvement on last year. But Derrick Henry is a solid and very capable backup as a rookie, and he's a power running back too, so I wouldn't be surprised if Derrick Henry eats into Murray's carries a little bit, but I got to lean Murray just for the veteran presence and because he's getting the reins to start the season.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to go Murray as well. I think he's in that same boat with Eddie Lacy, where last year just has a bad taste in the mouth of fantasy owners. It just didn't go as well as people were hoping it would. I think this system works better for him, and we always talk about how teams are going to work in rookie quarterbacks, let them take their time, work into the system, and we never say the same for any other position. I think Tennessee is in a position to be able to do that with Derrick Henry, where they could really run Murray to the ground, basically, and allow Henry to kind of work himself into the NFL system, get used to the speed, get used to just the bigger defenders that he's going to have to go up against. So I think Murray will see a lot more action early on, and like you said, it'll kind of even itself out throughout the season. But I do see Murray getting the majority of the carries for most of the year. So let's go. Go
I
ahead.
agree. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
All right. So let's go to a running back situation that is weird. The San Diego Chargers. Melvin Gordon, how I thought you were going to be good. He was my Ezekiel Elliott, where I finally went, okay, I'm giving in. I'm going to go with the rookie running back. It did not work out for me at all. 0 touchdowns for Melvin Gordon. And Danny Woodhead, not the best running back in the world, but oh my God, is he so good out of the backfield in the receiving game. That's where he gets 85% of his points. But in San Diego, when you're going to be trailing as much as they are, I think that's the way you lean. I go Danny Woodhead.
I go Danny Woodhead also, and I also had Melvin Gordon as the first running back I picked last season in our big money league, and I had to suffer with the same disappointments that you did with Melvin Gordon. And listen, out of all the running backs who had at least 111 touches last season, Melvin Gordon was the only one who did not score a touchdown. So that's a real head scratcher to me. And here's the guy coming into his second year as a lead back, and he doesn't even have one single career touchdown. And you look at the numbers that Danny Woodhead put up last year. He had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage and 9 touchdowns. That versus Melvin Gordon, it's hard to lean any other way. And you're absolutely right. San Diego is probably going to be trailing a lot of their games. And when you're trailing, you don't run the ball as much. So give me the guy who's going to be coming out of the backfield and making plays in the receiving aspect.
Just for funsies, over or under 2.5 touchdowns for Melvin Gordon this season?
Does that include receiving touchdowns? Because you might get one.
No, rushing.
Oh, man. That's tough. I gotta... That really is tough. I'll take the over, but by half a touchdown. I say he finds the end zone 3 times.
It's definitely not going to be a you betcha, because I'm in that same boat of I don't know.
Yeah, it really is tough.
I was curious.
How do you gauge something like that? I mean, he did something that nobody's ever seen before, as far as complete futility at the running position.
All right, we got one more here in this little game, and that is the Detroit Lions. Amir Abdullah, Theo Riddick. Who do you take?
Again, these are tough, and that's why we put these out there, because you guys are going to be facing these same situations in your draft. So, we're kind of putting a spot here to help you guys out, and that's the whole point of this. For me, Theo Riddick is kind of like a poor man's Danny Woodhead. He's going to put up some good numbers as a receiver, not quite Danny Woodhead-like numbers, but certainly serviceable numbers, and he's going to have that plug-and-play kind of feel to him where he's got the right matchup. Maybe you give him a start. But for me, I like upside, and the same reason I took Devontae Freeman last season is why I will take Amir Abdullah in this situation, just because I think Amir Abdullah has the potential, and I think that the coaching staff is now going to put a little bit more onus on that running game being more clear-cut this season than it was last year. Last year, the coaches made a complete mess out of that running game, and you didn't know who was going to start from week to week. You had no idea what was going to happen with Detroit, and it made it really confusing. But down the stretch, they started to figure it out. And I'll take a guy who's got a really high upside, like Abdullah, just on the chance that he has a breakout year.
I kind of like Riddick. I mean, yes, I think with you, they're going to try to get a bit more of the running game going. I mean, they can't be any worse. There was no team in the entire NFL who had less rushing yards than the Lions last year. But Theo Riddick, I mean, looking up his stats, he had 80 receptions last year. 80. That puts him near the top of the receivers. So I kind of lean towards him, and actually tied for 18th in receptions last year as a running back. So I like him. We'll talk a little bit more about Detroit here in a little bit. But I like the balance that they're kind of getting to it. And you get a running back like Riddick who will play a huge part in the passing game, and he might steal some touchdowns too.
Yeah, I mean, and, for all of these teams we've just went over, I can't blame somebody for just choosing to avoid those situations if that's the way that they see the draft. But you're going to get in a situation a lot of times it's hard to avoid them all, and you probably end up getting stuck with one. So hopefully this helps you a little bit. But, as you say, Riddick is great out of the backfield. There is some production there. If that defense is improved like they claim it is, maybe Riddick's value goes down a little bit. And I just feel like if I'm going to gamble on a mid-round guy, Abdullah feels like a higher upside potential for me.
Yeah, I can see it. But let's go from the teams that have a dual running back issue to those teams that you know who the starter is. You're probably going to draft him in the first 2-3 rounds. But now you need to handcuff him. Who are those handcuffs that, you absolutely need as a handcuff, or, as we've seen in a lot of fantasy drafts, you want to steal from the guy that drafts that main guy, the McKinnon to the Adrian Peterson? Who are some of those handcuffs that you just really want?
I should say first off that for handcuffing, for me, a lot of times I will almost always find a way to get the handcuff for my first running back that I choose. And that's just a security blanket. And there may be a couple of guys out there that maybe you don't feel you need to, but you know what? That first round running back, those guys should be somebody that you should be handcuffing almost across the board regardless, just because the value of them is obviously high. So, you can give me any of the guys in the first round as far as running backs are concerned and say, yes, you should handcuff them. But as we get out of the first round and we work our way down the line a little bit, I think, you should be looking at guys like Jamal Charles, who has the injury history. He's had the ACL issues, and he's in a running scheme offense, and his backup is Spencer Ware. Now I believe Charkandrick West is looking at third string. Spencer Ware proved last season, in limited fashion, granted, that he was a more than capable backup running back who has a potential, running back one quality to him if Jamal Charles does go down again. Also, I look at a guy like a Thomas Rawls, who, he had some very good numbers when he was on the field, but he's coming into the season after shattering his ankle. That's a pretty serious injury for a running back, and we don't know where he's sitting right now as far as his health and whether or not he's going to be a guy you can depend on out of the gate in Seattle. And, Seattle's got Chris, who, he's kind of a strange guy for me. All I hear about Christine Michael is how good his potential is and blah blah blah. I hear so much about him, and I never really see anybody giving him the chance to prove it. I think Seattle might give him that chance if anything happens to Rawls this season. So he would be a guy for me. Moving down the list, Matt Forte is another guy that came off an injury last year. He's 30 years old. You got Bilal Powell behind him, who is a very good receiver out of the backfield also, and kind of a multi-dimensional running back. So he's got strong second string potential. And, Ryan Matthews, can we expect Ryan Matthews to stay on the field? Do you feel comfortable with Ryan Matthews as one of your two starting running backs? Because I have to be honest, I don't.
I don't think anyone has ever said Ryan Matthews and comfortable in the same sentence, ever.
I agree, and yet I see him going near the top 20, or at least between 20 and 25. So I would certainly, the handcuffing it comes down to secure your first running back's team in a way. I kind of look at it as a team, like I did last year with Freeman. I took the Atlanta running game, and I kind of like to do the same thing with my first running back, is to take the backup and basically lock down that team running game. So you focus on guys that have strong running, tendencies, and then you focus on guys with injuries, guys that have an injury history, guys that go down a lot, and it would behoove you to take their handcuffs for that very reason.
Yeah, and there's one team that you didn't bring up that I have to here, because I think it's super important, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. We've already shown a little bit of concern with Ezekiel Elliott. Again, a little bit of the hamstring issues. He did look good in his third preseason game. But the question to me becomes, who would you handcuff him with? And to me, it's a no-brainer, and I'm kind of surprised it's even a question. Mine is, it's Alfred Morris. I think if Ezekiel Elliott goes down, Alfred Morris could be a top 10 running back in the league behind that offensive line. That's why a lot of people are going so high with Elliott, is because that offensive line is so amazing in Dallas, and Alfred Morris still has it. I don't believe in Darren McFadden. I think he's a decent running back still when he can stay healthy himself. But I love Alfred Morris, and I even drafted him in a league that I don't have Ezekiel Elliott, just because I feel like, if the chance does go that he does go down, I now have a running back that should have been drafted in the first 2 rounds.
It's hard to argue that, and with Ezekiel Elliott going in the first round in most drafts, that basically automatically puts the Dallas handcuff situation on my draft targets, for that simple reason that I always like to secure my number one guy. But Alfred Morris is a veteran running back. He was a strong running back with the Redskins when the Redskins kind of had some questionable passing situations with RG3 and just a clouded quarterback situation there. He still put up some really good numbers. There is a little bit of concern because McFadden put up some really good numbers last year too, and actually was a lot healthier than I think most people expected him to be based on his previous history. So it'll be really interesting, and that's one people should pay close attention to, is who ends up winning that backup job between McFadden and Morris. And I think you certainly could take a stab at either one of those guys in the later rounds.
All right, so let's kind of wind down the running backs here. Just give me one sleeper, one bust, and then just one flyer. That guy that you're going to take in the last 2 to 3 rounds. That he probably won't get you many points early on, but he could be that guy that helps you win a championship if the dominoes fall correctly.
Well, I did go ahead and I've got a couple running backs, but I'll make them quick and I'll just make it succinct. My running back sleepers off the top is a veteran, and that's LeGarrette Blount. And it's with Brady's out for 4 weeks, Dion Lewis is now hurt again, and we don't know for how long exactly. I think the ground and pound option of Blount seems very likely, at least through week 4 until Brady comes back, and then beyond that, depending on how long Lewis is out. New England likes to run over teams when they think they can, so that's one. The other one for me is Jordan Howard, and he is, in case you guys don't know, he's the guy behind Jeremy Langford in Chicago. And he was very unimpressive last season in replacing Matt Forte, and John Fox is a coach that loves to run the ball. So I think Jordan Howard could actually take that job outright at some point this season.
Yeah, I mean, those are 2 good ones. Mine's not... I'm trying to go down and just see a sleeper that we haven't really talked about yet, and nothing has jumped off the page. So mine's going to be kind of a cheap sleeper. He's going to go early in drafts, but I think he should go way earlier. And honestly, I don't even know why. Don't listen to me. I'm awful. Jeremy Hill. I am so high on Jeremy Hill this year. We've already talked about how they only have 1 receiver and 1 tight end. I think they lean on the running game even more. He's one of those guys that would think about taking late in the first round. So it's a weak sleeper, but I'll get into the deep sleeper in a little bit.
I think it's fair as a sleeper, and I'll give you the fair because Marvin Bernard. There I go with my Giants roots. Bernard is going to be coming in for a lot of the passing downs too. So how much is Jeremy Hill going to see the field, sharing the position with him? As far as a first round pick, I think you lost your mind.
To lose it, you would have to have had it, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I cannot possibly consider him in the first round, but I do think that it's a fair sleeper option if you really feel like he's going to get a lot more opportunity than he did last season in kind of a more high-profile timeshare.
All right, so what about your bust? Give me a bust.
All right, well, I'll throw. I've got two busts also, and I'll make this one quick and easy. But anyone that comes out of the Ravens' backfield is a bust for me, and it's just because we don't know who it's going to be. We don't even know if Baltimore knows who it's going to be, and even if it ends up being somebody, we don't know if Baltimore is going to like it. And if they don't know who they're going with, you don't know either. And for me, just avoid Baltimore if you can. That's quick. That's succinct, to the point. My other bust is Matt Jones. And the reason I think Matt Jones is going to be a bust is because, first of all, if Kirk Cousins does end up showing anything like what he did last season, you've got Matt Jones coming in with a shoulder injury, which does not bode well for that position. It's a primary hitting point for a back, and there's a very good chance that will be a recurring issue going forward. Even though I do not like that as it pertains to Cousins as much as you do, I still think it's going to hurt the ground game with Cousins possibly struggling a little bit more this season, and that shoulder injury really has me bothered.
Yeah, and they just don't run the ball in Washington. My bust, Ezekiel Elliott, I think, is the main one I want to go with. But the one I'll focus on for this segment is Devontae Freeman, the darling of last season. Mike was raved about him all season as he led him to a championship.
I love that guy.
However, if you break down the stats a little bit further, there's something to be worried about. First 7 games, Devontae Freeman had 9 touchdowns and rushed for over 100 yards 4 of those 7 games. The last 9 games of the season, 2 touchdowns, never rushed for more than 88 yards, and 4 times didn't reach 50 yards. He kind of slowed down a little bit, and that worries me. I think teams started figuring him out. I think Atlanta is going to more focus on a dual running back situation with Freeman and Coleman, and he is still going in the first round, and I wouldn't go there. He is a late second to third round pick for me.
Allow me to retort.
Please do.
I agree Freeman may have worn down a little bit down the stretch, but I also think that Matt Ryan wore down the stretch too, and I don't think teams respected the pass as much as they got into that latter half of the season. And with that in mind, teams started stacking up on Devontae Freeman. But if you look at what Devontae Freeman also did as a receiver, he had 578 yards and 3 touchdowns and had 73 receptions. So when you factor that in, over 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns, I can't say that I'm going to completely abandon Devontae Freeman just because of what happened in the latter half of last season. But I will give you the fact that I think Matt Ryan is going to have to improve on what he did in the second half of last season too in order to help a Devontae Freeman look more like the first half guy and less like the second half guy.
Yeah, like I said, 14 touchdowns, 10 of them in the first 7 games. So I'm just going to throw it out here, just for fun. Jeremy Hill, Devontae Freeman. You want to bet it?
You betcha. That's like pitching me a softball, in my opinion.
I disagree. So let's finish running backs. We've run very long on running backs, which I knew we would, because running backs is such an interesting topic. I just want...
It's crucial, too, really.
a quick word association for a few guys that are interesting. Carlos Hyde.
Injuries are a concern, but who else do you like on that team?
Oh, very true. Frank Gore.
Welcome back, Andrew Luck, and a passing threat only helps his cause.
I like Frank Gore this year, actually. Rashad Jennings.
Well, the last 4 weeks he was averaging close to 20 carries a game, and that passing game makes him dangerous.
Latavius Murray.
His numbers faded really badly in the second half of last season, and it makes you question whether or not he has endurance.
And we talked about him before, but Ryan Matthews.
He's great if he stays on the field, but fewer injured more often than he is.
And we kind of skipped it. Deep sleeper. The guy that the dominoes need to fall.
For me, it's Bilal Powell, and I know I brought him up a little bit earlier briefly, but he's got a 30-year-old running back with injuries in front of him, Matt Forte. He finished inside the top 15 last year in running back targets, catches, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. And he's shown an ability to fill in very well in the absence of Chris Johnson and Chris Ivory in the past. So I think he's one of those guys that has a really high upside if something happens to Forte.
And honestly, I don't even think that many dominoes need to fall for Bilal Powell to have a good fantasy season. I was happy when Ivory went because Bilal Powell was staying, and I thought he was going to be the main guy, and I was totally fine with it. Getting Matt Forte is better, but Bilal Powell is legit. My deep sleeper, and it's one that I wouldn't even draft, to be honest, but just keep your eye on throughout the season, is actually the third-string running back for Green Bay, and that's John Crockett. Watching a bit of their preseason games, that dude's a beast. Just was running over everyone, getting as many extra yards as you could. His numbers were great. Now, a lot would happen for him to get there. I mean, Eddie Lacy, we're still not super proven on. I'm very high on, but he's not super proven, and James Stark has injury concerns as well. John Crockett's one of those guys that, you know, if the entire running team kind of fell apart, he could become a star. And just one more late sleeper, just for fun. Reggie Bush is in Buffalo, and it intrigues me. Almost to the point where I might use like a last pick on him, just for fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, Reggie Bush is one of those guys who can also put up numbers when he stays on the field, but I'm probably leaning towards avoiding him just because I don't trust him. I just can't. I mean, he's in that oft injured. He's probably in my top 5 most injured players list, and because of that, I mean, I know
the only reason it intrigues me, it's Rex Ryan. He loves those speedsters. I know Reggie Bush has probably lost a step, but he loves those kind of players. He loves to just add them to their offense, and it intrigues me.
He does, but I mean, Reggie Bush is also expected to take over the return team duties too. So, you know, how long is he going to last? I don't know. I mean, I wait. I'm a wait Bush. It's you. To me, you could take, you know, most fantasy football seasons go 13 games. Let's pick a number from 1 to 13, and that's the week that Reggie Bush goes down for the season. Yeah. But as far as Crockett goes, I like the fact that you went really deep on a sleeper and a guy that a lot of people don't know that much about because, you know, he is kind of new and he is behind 2 other guys in Lacy and Starks. But just to throw this out there, because you brought up his performance in the preseason, don't put very much onus on the preseason, people, please.
Yes.
The preseason is kind of like drafting a kicker in any round other than the last round. You have vanilla defenses with very little blitzing, and you have second and third round players playing in the preseason. So whatever you do, don't rely on what you see in the preseason to make determinations for you come draft day.
No, and trust me, there is a reason why I didn't bring up his stats so far in the preseason, because those don't matter. It was just the look of him going through the defenders. It wasn't like he's making all these crazy moves or anything like that. I'm right there with you. Preseason, you can only take half a step with. You can kind of see if like a quarterback is in sync with the receiver, and even then, if they are off sync, usually by week 1 or 2, they figured it out. But with a guy like Crockett, it was just the way he was running has me intrigued.
Absolutely, and that's what they expect out of Eddie Lacy. But if they don't get it again this year, I imagine the leash won't be very long.
All right, so we've definitely run long on running back. So let's get to wide receivers, which has some interesting players there too. And I want to start with a team that's interesting, and that's the Arizona Cardinals. What other team can you say that they have 3 guys just so jam-packed as far as fantasy value? In fact, if you go to the ESPN rankings and you go to the wide receiver rankings, you have Michael Floyd is 28, Larry Fitzgerald is 30, and John Brown is 31. So I'm going to give you the tough task. Rank these 3 men, sir.
For me, I like John Brown better than the other 2, to be honest, and that's because he's younger. He put up bigger numbers last season, and that right there is enough for me to say I'll take John Brown. Plus, you have Michael Floyd, who was injured last season for a lot of the early part of the year, and Larry Fitzgerald still puts up some great numbers, but he's getting a little bit long in the tooth. So I will take the young upside in a situation where you got 3 guys kind of in the same boat. So flip Floyd and Brown for me, according to the ESPN rankings as you have it. I like Brown. Then Fitzgerald and Floyd are very close for me. That's kind of a 50-50 toss-up. You could go either way there, but I like John Brown the best.
I think I would agree with ESPN and say I like Michael Floyd. Yes, he got hurt last year, but I just like his talent. I think he's their number 1. I would go him 1. John Brown has some big playability, so I'd put him 2 and Larry Fitzgerald 3. But trust me, if Larry Fitzgerald fell to me, I would not be upset.
Well, John Brown led their team in receiving 9 of their games last season, and Michael Floyd only led it for 4. So I'll let that influence my decision as well.
Yes, absolutely. A big one. Just how about a early round pick that you are avoiding, kind of like what we did with the running backs? Who's somebody that is going in that first to second round that you just don't agree with?
That's kind of a tough one at the wide receiver position because there's so many wide receivers that you can choose from this season that seem to have a really big upside. But for me, I'm a little leery of DeAndre Hopkins, and it's because I don't like his yards after the catch totals very much, and I don't trust Osweiler. As we discussed him a little bit earlier as well, that Osweiler is
poo-poo.
How much can we really expect from him? So I think DeAndre Hopkins is rated a little bit higher than I like. Yes, he's talented, but can they get the ball to him?
Yeah, I mean, in our rankings, we both had him in the top 6, but even then, I might even pick somebody that's behind him, even though I have him ranked higher. He scares me, again, because of Osweiler. I cannot trust Brock Osweiler at all. What a waste of money for Houston. Good grief.
Well, let's see what happens, but I find Denver would let him walk and roll with Sanchez this season if they expected Osweiler to be anything.
Well, I think they also expected they were going to get somebody better than Sanchez or Simeon.
Be that as it may, they may end up putting up similar numbers.
And again, just as you can't take preseason as it is funny that I have went out and bought the new Madden, and I've played a few games online, and I have played Denver twice. And both times I've played Denver, they used Paxton Lynch as their quarterback. So they had no faith in Sanchez or Simeon.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens there, but I think Sanchez's price tag is better than Osweiler's too, so keep that in mind also.
So, I mean, speaking of that quarterback mess, how far down does Demaryius Thomas fall in your rankings now?
I see he's rated in the anywhere from 13 to 17. I don't have him in my top 15, but I do have him right there, and he is he's a dynamic wide receiver. Don't get me wrong, and the guy is great in the open field. I still remember Tim Tebow's one claim to fame game where Demaryius Thomas caught a 5-yard pass, and Tebow got so much glory for making a big play, which was a slant route 5 yards across the middle, and Demaryius Thomas ran the other 80 yards for a touchdown. But let's all forget about that.
Be honest, you still have nightmares.
I do a little bit, yeah. But getting past that's a perfect example of a guy who can just run away from people. So if they can get the ball to Demaryius Thomas, it would not shock me one bit if he finishes somewhere in the top 10. But that's the big question mark. Can they get the ball to him?
Yeah, I don't know. The Denver team is a big mess.
And with Emmanuel Sanders on the other side, too, that's another quality receiver that's going to eat into Thomas's production.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just get right into it. I won't limit you to one or two here, as we haven't really broken down a ton of names in the receiving core. But give me a few sleepers, some of those middle round picks that you could really see leading you to your championship.
Well, I'll start off with a veteran who is not getting hardly any love, and he's a guy who right now whose average draft is 12th round and around the 51st wide receiver taken, and that's Vincent Jackson. Here's a veteran that's he's getting no respect whatsoever, and now he's got the emergence of Mike Evans across from him, plus Jameis Winston's making some strides at quarterback. I think he's a veteran sleeper who isn't getting the respect he deserves.
Here, I'll go the exact opposite of you for my first sleeper, and it's a rookie out of Cleveland, and that's Corey Coleman. Again, I think Cleveland's going to be that junk time team, and he has a huge burst of speed over there in Ohio. I like Corey Coleman as a big sleeper. What's your next one?
That's some possibility there too. And just real quick, I'm not going to say guys like Kevin White or Sterling Shepard, because sleepers are no longer sleepers for me when everybody lists them as a sleeper.
Yes.
So I'm trying to throw out names that people might not have really been thinking about too much. So my other sleeper, and this one is a rookie, I like Tyler Boyd, because somebody's got to line up opposite of A.J. Green. And in my opinion, A.J. Green is one of the best wide receivers in the league. And Brandon LaFell is terrible. I'm sorry, but he has absolutely awful hands. And that was with Tom Brady throwing to him. So how long do you think it will take for Brandon LaFell to completely fall out of any favor he might have in Cincinnati? So I like a guy like a Tyler Boyd to have some potential.
How about the guy that he's replacing, Mohamed Sanu? How do you feel about him in Atlanta?
There's another guy. Now you're lining him up opposite Julio Jones. Mm-hmm. It's hard not to like anybody who's lining up across from a stud wide receiver to not necessarily be a wide receiver 1 or even a wide receiver 2, but definitely a flex option or a wide receiver 3 for those of you with 3 wide receivers. These guys are going to get single coverage. They're going to have safeties rolling away from them. They're going to have a lot of opportunities to make plays. So anytime you have a player like a Sanu who's lining up opposite of Julio Jones, you can expect those guys to have some real opportunities to make some big plays, as teams tend to focus on the number one guy.
Yeah, and one of my sleepers that I'll add in here too, maybe not as much of a sleeper as he kind of broke out last season, but Devin Funchess. He really did a great job of breaking out when the best receiver on that team was Ted Ginn Jr. And now Kevin Benjamin's back and is going to get a lot of attention. I think Funchess could improve even more from what he did last year.
Yeah, that's a fair pick, and for the same reasons. I mean, Funchess could actually outperform Benjamin. That's a possibility. We don't know. And just to throw in one more for me, too, a guy that kind of fell out of favor after he was a very popular waiver wire pickup last season, and that's Kamar Aiken. Steve Smith he's really long in the tooth. I love Steve Smith's game, even though he plays for the Ravens, and I obviously can't stand the Ravens because I'm a Steeler fan, but Kamar Aiken's kind of getting no looks here whatsoever. They brought in Mike Wallace, but Mike Wallace has played for 3 teams in 3 years. There's got to be a reason there. Steve Smith with his Achilles injury, and Brashad Perryman, who everybody was jumping on last season, being hurt. Kamar Aiken's just fell off the map completely. So there's another guy you might want to look at as a guy who has a chance to to possibly put up some numbers.
All right, so let's go the other way. Give me a few busts, some guys that you're avoiding or think that they're getting drafted too early.
All right, well, these guys are busts based pretty much on where people are taking them, and not so much because I don't think that they're still going to be at least reasonably good players or decent players. But my first one is Doug Baldwin, and I can't buy into where people are taking Doug Baldwin, and a lot of it is based on the fact that he put up so much of his numbers late in the season, and he did it when Jimmy Graham was hurt, and he did it when Thomas Rawls or Marshawn Lynch were out, which kind of made him be the guy. And I don't think teams were necessarily prepared for him to be the guy. And even though I think he's still going to put up some decent numbers, I can't see him being anywhere near where people are projecting him in the top 20. I just don't feel it there. I have him down a little ways from there. Do you want to respond to that, or do you want me to give you the other one?
Well, I was just going to say, with Baldwin, I kind of understand it's going to be tough. He was one of those other co-leaders for touchdowns in a season, and that's tough to repeat as well. So I think I'm with you with Baldwin.
Yeah, and, let's not sleep on Tyler Lockett either, who is a big play receiver. Then that could take away some of Baldwin's production, too.
Crazy speed with Tyler Lockett.
And my other guy, who I really like him, especially for you PPR teams out there, but I don't know how much I can trust him, and that's Julian Edelman. He missed 7 games in the last 2 seasons. He had 2 foot surgeries in the offseason. Tom Brady's going to be gone for 4 weeks, as we all know. And a guy with foot injuries that has required multiple surgeries is not a guy that I want to trust as a really high pick at my wide receiver position. And Garoppolo for 4 games, what can we hope to get out of Edelman?
Yeah, mine, another bust for me, is a player that I don't trust that much. I mean, he could definitely get the junk time, and he put up a ton of points last year. It's Sammy Watkins. He's the only guy in that entire offense, the receiving game, other than McCoy for Buffalo. And that just seemed, anytime you ever watched the Buffalo Bills last year, they would be terrible and be terrible and be terrible. And then all of a sudden you have an 80-yard touchdown pass to Sammy Watkins. At some point, NFL teams are going to realize that you just put a guy well over the top of Sammy Watkins, and if he gets within 2 feet of that deep guy, you're doing something wrong. Don't ever let him get deep on you. I don't think that he's going to have the year he had last year. So Sammy Watkins is a bust for me.
That's a fair pick, but guys like Randy Moss made a living getting behind people, and nobody ever figured it out. But obviously Randy Moss was a complete beast as far as his size and his leaping ability. But
Randy Moss was also on the Vikings with Chris Carter and with Tom Brady. So
yeah, fair enough. But there's guys. I think. If Sammy Watkins does fail, then that just means that my Tyrod Taylor running game should be a little bit better, right?
Maybe.
Watkins isn't open. Run for 50 and a touchdown, Taylor. I like that.
All right. Any more busts for you?
Yeah, those were the 2 that I had, off the top of my head that I just felt were going too high. Now, that doesn't mean that those guys aren't going to produce. I just don't see them being top 20 guys, and that's where they're going in most drafts. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of the other guys, I kind of like them for various reasons. So I don't feel too strongly about any other busts that are up way too high for my liking.
All right, so who's that late round guy? That guy you might throw a last couple pick in just to see what happens.
I like Tajay Sharp, and it's because it looks like he's going to have the opportunity to be a starter, which that right there in and of itself gives value to him. He's going to be starting opposite of Rashard Matthews. And again, he's going to be playing on Tennessee, who's going to be playing from behind a lot. And I really feel like Mariota is going to take some steps towards being a much better quarterback. In fact, I had him as my sleeper QB in our last podcast. And I don't think that Kendall Wright or Andre Johnson are good enough to take his job away from him. I think it's his job to lose almost now. And so that's my deep sleeper is Tajay Sharp.
Well, I have two really deep just possibles. I don't have the most faith in, but you just again to keep your eye on. One's Victor Cruz, obviously has been crazily injured forever, coming back as Sterling Sharp and Odell Beckham out there, so he could be the best third receiver in the game if he can stay healthy. I do have interest in Terrell Pryor. Again, don't take anything out of the preseason, but he and Robert Griffin III seem to have a bond and have connected nicely, and I want to see if that continues on into the regular season. But the one that I'm most interested in is Jamison Crowder out of Washington. Again, I've said how I like Kirk Cousins and the Washington passing game this year, and Crowder could be one of those guys that you can take late, and he's going to get you that 6-7 receptions for 60-70 yards and a touchdown almost every week.
Yeah, I think Crowder's is a good point, a good pick too, and he has a chance obviously to come in there as their number 3 guy. I imagine Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon would be 1-2, and you got to keep an eye on the rookie Josh Doxson, who's injured with an Achilles issue right now. But yeah, Crowder is definitely one of those guys. And I'm sorry, I've never been a big Pierre Garçon fan, so it wouldn't shock me if Crowder did start putting up some numbers if he didn't find a way to get himself into that first tier, the first 2 guys.
Yeah. So let's finish off wide receivers as we did with the running backs with a little word association with Mike. And let's just start out with Golden Tate.
He's the man in Detroit, and they have designs on a more balanced attack.
How about the returning Kelvin Benjamin?
For Kelvin Benjamin, his QB is Cam Newton, but the question is, can he return to the promise of 2014?
All right. How about a couple rookies that we haven't talked about yet? Kevin White.
Well, expectations were high last year for him before he got hurt, and they will be playing from behind a lot.
I love Kevin White. Sterling Shepard.
Having Odell Beckham across from you means you have to have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. That number 2 receiver can be a sneaky play.
Yeah, number 2 guy with the stud across from you.
Yep, absolutely. And finally here, the enigma, Josh Gordon.
Can you trust him? I mean...
No.
He's an addict, and addicts are hard to trust. He's out of shape, and to me, he's just not worth the risk unless it's really late.
Yeah, I'm with you, and that's another reason why I'm interested in Terrell Pryor, because I have zero faith in Josh Gordon. So let's get to tight ends here. Obviously, Gronk has been going late first round, maybe early second in most drafts, so we know what he is. But how much later are you going until you're getting to the next level of tight ends?
That's an excellent question, and it's one of those things where how much value can you really see after Gronkowski? You've got guys like Jordan Reed and Olsen, but for me, for where I see Jordan Reed going, which is early to mid 3rd round, late 3rd round, I can't necessarily say that I want to spend that high of a draft pick on a guy with a injury history that he has. I do not deny his talent, but I think I could probably find a running back or a wide receiver that I really like there more than a Jordan Reed. And as you move down the draft a little bit, guys like Greg Olsen are going late 4th round or early 5th round. I just, these guys, to me, I can't find myself spending top 5 draft picks on anybody other than Gronkowski, and maybe a Reed if he slips down, maybe into the 4th or 5th round. Maybe for me, I'm kind of looking at the tight end position similar to the way I'm looking at the quarterback position this year, where I am feeling a lot better about playing matchups and maybe taking 2 decent second-tier tight ends and kind of rolling the dice a little bit at the tight end position, because I just don't want to spend a top 5 draft pick on a tight end this year. I really don't. And once you get past Gronkowski, Reed, and Olsen, then you get into a group of second-tier tight ends, and you can make an argument for the next 6 on the list, really. I mean, what do you expect from a Delaney Walker? Can he put up the numbers he put up last year? Who knows? Travis Kelce, everybody expects him to just be absolutely phenomenal, and he shows flashes of brilliance, but can he stay healthy, and will he get the ball? And, a guy like a Coby Fleener, who I think has a great opportunity to produce in New Orleans, we saw what Jimmy Graham did there, so there's one of those guys that, both you and I have in our top 6. But again, these are kind of second-tier guys, and how high do you really want to go? I don't think I'm going to be looking at tight ends much in the first 5 or 6 rounds. I would say I'm probably leaning more towards like a round 7 or later to pick up my tight ends, and I do think I'm going to pick up 2 tight ends probably, unless for some reason a Gronkowski or a Jordan Reed or a Greg Olsen don't get the credit they should get.
Yeah, and again, we said it in our first 2 podcasts, read your draft, kind of see how the room is going or the online board is going, and kind of see how things are flowing, and it's going to change the way you approach your draft. But I'm the same way. I don't reach for a tight end because usually they go a little earlier than I would like. I really like Greg Olsen this year. Listen, he had a great season, and he was the man in Carolina. Now he has a few extra weapons around him. Will get a little less attention, and he's still amazing in the red zone. So I think he's going to put up a ton of points, but he's just going too early for me. And as you said, that second tier, they all have questions. They're all possible great options, but usually at that point in a lot of drafts that you and I have been in over the years, it seems like the first couple tight ends go off the board, and that the moment that first tight end of that second tier goes, there's a run of them. And it's like, I would rather just wait. Let that run go, and then even go in more of a sleeper range. And like you said, take 2 of them, then just jump out and get one of the tight ends. Join the tight end train, if you will. I would rather get that wide receiver or running back that they have let slip to me than take the end of that second tier. So, I mean, I love guys like Coby Fleener, as you said. I love Julius Thomas in Jacksonville. Gary Barnidge was amazing last year. A new quarterback, so we'll see how they connect. But he is intriguing to me. Zach Ertz is intriguing as well. But if that run happens when I'm not ready to take a tight end, I would rather drop down and take the reliable Antonio Gates. I would like to take Zach Miller, who is now the big tight end in Chicago. Maybe even take a flyer on the returning Jimmy Graham. But, I mean, to be honest, again, we live in the Pacific Northwest, so Jimmy Graham is still believed to be a top 5 tight end around here. So, I mean, he goes way early in drafts over here. But I would rather go in that third tier tight end range and take 2 of them than where some of these other guys are going.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment there. And again, if one of those second tier guys manages to slip down to 8 or something, and if you feel really strongly about one of those second tier guys, like a Kelce, like a Fleener, then why not maybe be the guy to start that run if you really feel good about any of them? But as you get down there, like you said, there's an Eric Ebron out there who started to show some flashes last season. You've got Dwayne Allen, whose stock should go up, considering that Andrew Luck is back. So there's some guys out there in that third tier that you can probably piece together and create a pretty reliable situation as long as you play the matchups correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, again, I'll say this a lot over this week and next week, but the draft is very important. but always keep your ear to the ground for some of these other guys that are moving up in their team's draft orders depth charts, and kind of see who's starting to play favorites with the quarterback and getting more action. The waiver wire is definitely your friend, so definitely have no issues making tons of moves, trying different tight ends. That's why Mike and I like to let the main tight ends go, and as he said, play the matchups. And usually by then, you can play matchups for like 5 or 6 different tight ends, really, and if you play the waiver wire right.
Yeah, and I have to say, last season I did something I've never done before, and I took a tight end in the first round. At the end of the draft, I took Rob Gronkowski, but I did it because I really felt like Tom Brady was going to be pissed. And I really felt like that was the beginning of the Gronk U tour, and I felt strongly about it, and I think it paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. As you hold our championship,
right? And I don't feel that this year, though.
Yeah. Any last words? Any last advice here before we close shop here on this podcast?
Well, I think if you'd like, we could probably maybe throw a sleeper and a bust out there for the tight end position.
Yeah, go for it.
I kind of like a sneaky guy here, which, maybe he's still a sleeper for some of you, and that's Jared Cook. And I know that he was expected to do better in Tennessee and St. Louis, but who did Tennessee and St. Louis have at quarterback when he was there? Garbage. Now he's got Rodgers thrown to him, and the guy's 6'5", 254 pounds. I mean, he's an absolute beast, and he's going to now have Aaron Rodgers throwing in the ball, and he's excited to be in Green Bay and to have Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback, and I don't blame him. And there's a chance that this guy could end up making a move and maybe even sneak into the top 10 somehow. It wouldn't shock me at all with an offense like Green Bay's. So I like him as my sleeper tight end.
Yeah, my sleeper, young quarterbacks like to go to the tight end. He didn't have a great year with him last year. Maybe they connect a little bit more. I like Austin Swearinger-Jenkins in Tampa Bay to be that guy that you probably won't end up drafting, but one of those waiver wire pickups.
Yeah, it's, again, sleepers are sleepers, and deep sleepers are guys that you have to feel good about, and maybe you won't draft them at all, and maybe you will draft them, but if you don't draft them and they end up showing up and putting up huge numbers, you probably won't get them off of waivers if you played well along the ways. So it's one of those things. If you feel good enough about it, then take a flyer on a guy. That's kind of what a deep sleeper is. But
all right, so I want a bust. Give me that guy that's going in like the top 6 or 7 that will not finish in the top 10 in tight end.
This one's kind of easy for me, and I think there's a chance that you're going to end up taking the same guy. But for me, it's Tyler Eifert. And it's because his injury situation is just we don't know what's going to go on with it. We don't even know when he's coming back. Cincinnati doesn't know when he's coming back, and I still see him ranked in anywhere from 6 to 9 in the rankings. And it's just way too high for a guy who you don't even know when he's going to be on the field. And yeah, he had 13 touchdowns last season, which is amazing. And if he wasn't injured, I would say he's probably a top 5 tight end. But the reality is he's hurt, and he's got no timetable for his return. So I would steer clear.
Yeah, I would go with him for sure. Delanie Walker, to me, will be my big throw it out there bust. I think he will have a good year, and he probably will finish in the top 10, but a lot of sites have him in the top of that second, about the top of that second tier, and I don't have him there at all. I have him near the bottom of that second tier. I would rather have a Barnidge or a Fleener or a Travis Kelce before I would go with the Delanie Walker.
Yeah, and I kind of like Delanie Walker because of the fact that he's got last season he had 133 targets, which is a pretty high number for a tight end. And who's going to be the go-to receiver there? Rashard Matthews, Tajay Sharp. I mean, these guys, you got a second-year guy and a rookie coming in as the starting wide receivers. And while they may produce, it might take them a while to get into the system. And Mariota has established a rapport with Walker, and Walker might be the only guy he trusts, at least early on in the season.
It's possible. It's just, especially, I still worry about Mariota's health and the quarterback situation that might go on there. Again, a backup could also go with a tight end, but I like some of the young guys they have in Tennessee, and I think they're going to play a bit more up-tempo and a bit more from behind, and sometimes you get rid of that security blanket that is the tight end when you're trying to just go deep down the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think those receivers have some upside too, but I also think that Delanie Walker presents a reliable red zone target for Mariota, where those young guys might not have established enough confidence from him in order to target them so much in the red zone.
All right, well, I think that's just about to do it for this jam-packed episode, as we try to throw in as many names and stats as we could for those that do have drafts coming up this weekend. I think we're going to spend all of next week just kind of breaking down in more depth some more names, some more players. We'll hit some injury risks as the dress rehearsal, if you will, of the preseason is going on this week. Week 3 of the preseason is usually when you see the starters the most, and week 4 you probably won't see them at all. So we will kind of break that down, as well as just kind of discuss some more of these position battles as we get closer and closer to the regular season. But until Monday's podcast, from Mike and myself, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and draft wisely. We will see you Monday.